Even evil has its reasons. You're listening to the Villain's Advocate podcast.
Good time of the day to you, and welcome to the very first Villains Advocate podcast, the show where we look at things from the dark side. I'm your host, Kushel Mike, and I am pleased to bring you this newish kind of conversation, and I plan on this becoming a conversation between us from my home all the way in the Caribbean. Happy New Year to you, by the way, and knock on wood when I say good freaking riddance. I feel like I could speak for everybody when I say, with a word of caution, of course, that I'm glad that 2020 is in the rearview mirror. Man, oh man, what a horror show. What a nightmare. 0 out of 10. Pray to never do that ever again. This was horrible. This was awful. This was really a roller coaster year. But I pray to Almighty God that this year is much better for all of us and that the healing will be palpable for all of us who are hurting right now and dealing with the effects of COVID-19. I know it hasn't been easy for any of us in whatever way you have been trying to cope with this, but condolences to all of you who have lost members of your family to COVID-19. That is not easy. I doubt it's very much easy, and I absolutely empathize with you, and I pray God's divine peace upon your hearts and upon the hearts of your family members as you try to process all of this madness and all of this mess. Why did I pick that heavy note to start on? This is supposed to be a fun show. Guys, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It's supposed to be a fun show. Anyway, let's get fun now. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. I hope this new year is a great one for you. I hope that everything that you wish for, as it falls into alignment of God's will, that it comes through for you, and that really 2021 is just a better year for all of us. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this very first day of 2021. It's a great day to kick off something new and to start over and to modify and to upgrade the way that we think. New beginnings bring that sort of newness, and you're allowed to be in that newness, and I hope that you guys take advantage of that. So a bit about me. I am 26 years old. I am Trinidadian. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing starting a podcast, you guys. I figure, I'm just at that age where I need to figure out myself. I need to figure out what my purpose is. Or maybe I'm just bored and I need some dimensions. I think that's it. I think I just want to try something different and to give myself a bit of that extra oomph. I've been feeling very dead lately, and I think that COVID just kind of re-emphasized that or magnified that. But yeah, so and I'll tell you why exactly I started this podcast though. And unfortunately, it's not just to help people. You start new things and you're supposed to be eager to help people and stuff. I wish that was the case entirely for me. It's not, guys. I started this because I wanted to do something bigger than myself. And I know this is a selfish reason to start a podcast. And I know that every podcast guru is screaming at the phones right now, or at their favorite, at their laptops right now, to find a raison d'etre, for doing this stuff. But and I hate making this about me so early, but I took a look at myself this year and I realized that I could use more dimension. As introverted as I am, and being an introvert is not exactly an excuse for not having dimension and not putting yourself out there, but I realized I needed more dimension. Yes, I'm a Caribbean woman, I'm Trinidadian, I'm of African descent, black woman, and I can trace up on my mother's side at least to the slave woman that was sexually molested by her slave master. Ugh, hate to go there, but and started the ball rolling for my existence anyway. But I'm more than that. I'm so much more than that, and I feel like podcasting may be a great way for me to find and add that extra dimension. So this is by no means saying that I'm not good enough. This is just me saying that I know that there are more edges to me, to my personality, and I want to be able to see what that is. And if it requires trying out different things, so be it. I'm ready for it. Well, that, and people say I have a great radio voice. Do I though, guys? I don't know. You'll have to let me know in the comments and on Twitter, VAP on YouTube. And you guys will just have to let me know. I don't know. Maybe I do. Anyway, so I guess in a roundabout way, this is where this idea for this particular podcast was born, or to do a podcast was born. People say the world isn't black and white. It's gray. And I kind of both agree and I don't agree with that. For me personally, wrong is wrong, right is right. Those are two constants in my world that will never change, no matter how you decide to turn them over. And in that sense, the world is very much black and white. However, humans aren't programmable machines. Everybody has their reasons for doing or not doing things, and some of the reasons for them doing or not doing, you can't just brush it off and say, well, right is right and wrong is wrong. There's some reasons that you're just forced to say, well, I get that, I understand that, and I take that avenue if it was me as well. It isn't an excuse for doing the wrong thing, but at least you can empathize with someone who has done something that is evil or wrong, if that option is available. So my line of thought was that why not accord this a villain and make a show out of it? Let's get a little dimension on the people that we really just love to shake our fists at in ire and hope that they end up in a volcano or just get a constant itch between the toes, or at least an itch that they can't reach. It may not be always justifiable, but it's doable. And so that's where the actual idea for this show came about. And I thought it was so interesting, and I couldn't let it go. And so here we are doing this podcast, and I just have to say thank you so much for choosing to click on this podcast and to give me a bit of your ear, to give me a little bit of your time. And I don't want to ramble on too much about me, so let's get on to the actual concept of the show. So the Villain's Advocate is exactly what it sounds like. I attempt to defend the bad guys, and as the logo kind of gives away, it's bad guys in gaming. And when I say bad guy, I don't mean it just in the sense of how they were written, because it's very easy to defend the Shao Kahns and the Templars and the Bowsers of the world in terms of how they were created and their backstory and stuff. There's very little challenge there to defend a character's actions or inactions, because every action or inaction, as we said before, is valid in the right circumstances. So on this show, it's an attempt to defend the characters that you dislike as a whole, structurally, as concepts. So think Dog from Duckshoot, although I will not be defending that little monster on the show. He is a tyrant, and I hope his programming gets lost somewhere in the dark web, never to be seen again. But it's also about taking those kinds of characters and trying to defend their quote-unquote honor. I might get some of you mad, you may laugh, or I might just get your cogs turning while I do it. All of those reactions are fine. I'm all about starting great conversations about gaming as well as other stuff, because I'll tell you a secret. I'm starting off this podcast like this, and I started off wanting to do this show based solely on video game villains, but when I was doing research, I realized that there's so many great and complex villains outside of video games that I really want to pursue and explore them as well. So, and I know this is the first episode, and again, yes, pod gurus, I hear you. I pick a topic, I know, I get it. But this first episode is and the first couple of episodes will be about video game characters, but hopefully in the future, and maybe I will be able to come up with a schedule. It won't just be video game villains. We have other villains as well to explore, from Shakespeare and Disney and television and anime. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get into anime. But yeah, so for the first shows, or the first couple of shows at least, we will be dealing with video game villains, but as time goes on, we're going to do different villains altogether, because there are so many great villains out there that we can explore and try to analyze and justify. Quick disclaimer: any opposing argument featured on this show that I do decide to feature on this show is valid and welcome. They're not going to be used to shoot down anybody who has differing opinions. This is not to make anybody feel bad about having their opinions, even though sometimes the opinions may be obviously trash. The opinions are still valid, and this is to merely get us all talking about the games and the shows that we love, and to share with one another, and to build our personal intel, and to again change the way that we think, add some dimensions to ourselves and others, and to try at least to grow a little bit more empathetic every day. So if perhaps that is my reason, Dutch, to help all of us understand different points of view, not to necessarily change our minds about our morals and values, but to grow that sense of empathy and to help us be better people at the end of this entire process. So more than a fun show, I want us to be able to exercise our empathetic muscles. Okay? Cool. So like I said before, this show is all about defending the people that you love to hate, i.e. the bad guys. And bad guys are bad guys for different reasons. It's not always as simple as poisoning town's water supply and the whole good of humanity shtick. No. At some point, our parents were the villains of our narratives. Like, think about that craziness. Our parents who wanted the best for us, and who, as is the case with most of us at least, were right all along. Well, in most circumstances. But we never really saw it that way, and they became more of a hindrance than anything else. On this show, I'm going to try to address your concerns, if there are any, by bringing you the other point of view and taking you out of that echo chamber that can be our own head sometimes. And so this week, we start with Devora from Mortal Kombat 10 or Mortal Kombat X, however you want to refer to it. She is a relatively newcomer to the franchise. Well, not relatively. She is a newcomer to the franchise. And she's a really interesting character to me. Honestly, I didn't know that there was a problem with Devora until I started doing research for this podcast and for villains to actually cover. And I ended up finding her on the Gamer, that is at thegamer.com, list 10 worst new video game characters of the decade. I think that's the name of the list. Now, I personally enjoyed her mini arc and her manipulation of the Outworld, the current Outworld King, that's Kotal Khan. So this was pretty surprising for me to see her on any list of that kind of ilk. But it's also good because I get something to discuss for my very first podcast today. So this is for a bit of background for those of you who have never seen the game, or have never heard the game before, and you just really want to get a gauge of what the game is about. So Miss Devora, comes from a race called the Chitin, and they are a race of bug-like people. So she comes from, they're like bugs, but they have legs, and they kind of look like people, but they mostly look like bugs. I don't really know how to explain this in a proper way so that you can understand. I guess you'll just have to check the game out, but it's a bug person, guys. It's a bug person. That's who she is. So anyway, she comes from this race called the Chitin, and the Chitin live on these islands. Her home planet was absorbed by the planet of her current boss, which is called Outworld. Fair warning, you guys, there are so many names to remember in a lot of video games, but especially with Mortal Kombat, there are so many names to remember. So if you can't really follow, don't worry about it. Just try to follow what the essence of the story is. So her planet that she comes from was absorbed by her current boss's planet, which is called Outworld. And it would have been absorbed as per the rules of Mortal Kombat, which is you have one planet challenges the other to a series of fighting contests, and the amount of contests, it's 10 tournaments or 10 martial arts tournaments, if you want to put it that way, over a period of time. And the planet that wins 10 in a row gets to, quote unquote, eat the other planet and make the inhabitants of the planet that lost their slaves. So that's what happened with Devora's planet. Outworld challenge, I can't remember what the name of Devora's islands are, but I know they're islands. So Outworld challenged the islands for ownership of the islands, and the islands lost 10 in a row, obviously, and so Outworld gained Devora's people, which are the Chitin, as slaves. That's the concept there. A bit of colonization going on there in the Mortal Kombat world. Going on there, a bit of colonization going on in the Mortal Kombat world. So Devora guess the enterprising being, I don't know if I can call her a person, but being, I guess, is the proper name for her, that she is, she wasn't going to stand for that. And so what she did was, instead of becoming a slave and working with the underlings, which were her fellow people, she pledged allegiance to the Outworld King, and she became his right-hand person. Now, the person who's her current boss wasn't always the boss. It was another person named by the name of Shao Kahn. I feel like I've lost some of you already, but please bear me. So, obviously, there's succession, and the game that Devora is introduced in is Mortal Kombat 10. The king there, her current boss, is called Kotal Khan. The last boss was Shao Kahn, and he was the baddie in Mortal Kombat 9, and that was her first boss. So that was the guy who was in charge of Outworld at the time of them being absorbed by Outworld. And so she became his right-hand person, and after he died in the event of the last game, which is Mortal Kombat 9, she pledged her allegiance to Kotal Khan, who is the current boss of the game that she was a part of, or where we were first introduced to her. And this is the context that we're using for at least the gamer's criticism part. I do want to explore why she's evil and take it from that angle, but I also want to explore the gamer's criticism as well, because I want to get as much brain activity from other people as much as possible. So anyway, she's now Kotal's, when we meet her in Mortal Kombat 10, she's Kotal's lackey, and by the end of the game she becomes very much the villain, and we'll talk about how she became the villain very, very soon. Now we get to talk about her in that context as a villain and why she became that particular villain. So let's just jump straight into why she's evil. And I'm looking at a particular viewpoint put out on the web, but I want to get into the habit of analyzing all characters based on their storylines and their merits before jumping into the criticisms of other gamers. So for a little bit more background, and guys, just be patient with me because I know there's a lot of background, but we need to go through this so that you can understand where I'm kind of coming from. At the beginning of Mortal Kombat 10, Shinnok, I know, another name to remember, guys, I am so sorry, is the next god, and he was captured within an artifact by a current god called Raiden. He's the lightning god, with the help of Johnny Cage, who is human and from Outworld. Shinnok was trying to take over the world, Earth wasn't having that, of course. And so they ended up putting him in this amulet to kind of lock him off from everybody else. And to stop him from trying to absorb Earth, or what they refer to as Earth realm, like they absorbed Devora's Island and other worlds that we didn't get to really hear about in the game itself. So that amulet also is a great source of power. Those of you who game, you'll know this. Those of you who don't really game and you just wanted to get into the podcast, it's gonna be confusing, guys. But just stick with me, bear with me, please. So Melina, who is another villain in the game, she tried to steal the amulet right out from under Kotal, who was the custodian of that at the time. Well, at least it was in his possession. And Melina, another villain, was captured by Kotal and Lee. And she ended up being executed by Devora herself. But just after Melina's execution, we find out that her loyalties actually lie with the same Shinnok that tried to take over Earthrealm and is kind of the body of who is the bad guy, the big boss of Mortal Kombat X. And we find this out when we see her talking to a hologram of one of Shinnok's subordinates, Quan Chi. So for the mere fact that she turned on Kotal, who's for the most part aligned with the side of good, she is a villain. So she ended up turning on Kotal, and that's why she's a villain. But my problem with that notion is that it's not as if she's doing this just out of the blue. She literally told us from the beginning that this one, and she likes to speak in thirdish person, this one does what's best for the chitin. She's doing what's best for her. It's just that nobody else was listening. Nobody else was paying attention. Nobody else was believing that she actually meant what she said. She only cared about, or only cares about, what happens with her race. Multiple species have proven to her that no one else actually cares because of the whole absorption of her world and turning them into slaves. And nobody bothered to help. Earthrealm, Outworld, everybody just looked at the race being absorbed and was like, well, another world absorbed. That's just Mortal Kombat for you. Her world ended up being pillaged thanks to these crazy rules set by the gods of the game, which are referred to as the elder gods. And they don't even care. They set up the rules. They have literally the power to set people free from this nonsense that is Mortal Kombat, this colonization attempt that is Mortal Kombat. And they just decided, well, let's just put rules to it, guys. Let's put rules to this enslavement. Let's give everybody a fair shake to fight for themselves. When they could have literally said, hey, nobody colonize nobody else. Everybody live on their own planet, and if you do that, you're done. So the elder gods didn't even care about them. And so what she ended up doing was taking a position that if nobody cares for us, we're going to have to be the ones to care for ourselves. And truthfully, I really do not blame her for that. I really think that if no one from the chitin race had taken that position, I really don't think they would have lasted, or they will last much longer. I honestly feel that we wouldn't have gotten a Devora if she hadn't taken that position. And so I fail to see how somebody could possibly be evil, or at least more evil, for trying to preserve themselves and trying to survive. Because it's literally in our triangle of needs there, guys. I know she's not exactly human, but Maslow's triangle hierarchy of needs, one of the main things is survival, and that fight to survive. I hope I'm saying that right, guys. Please don't kill me if I'm wrong about that. But I think that's up there. I think that's up there. Anyway, if it's not, I'll check it. But I think that is one of the things that are up there that need to survive, that need to or at least the whole triangle is built out of a need to survive. And nobody had the concern for them to try to help them to survive. And I fail to see how that's more evil than one, putting roots to what is clearly colonization, and two, participating or actively participating in colonization because you're too lazy to do what it is you need to do. I think she's less of a villain than both Outworld and the Elder God structure combined. And I fail to see how she ended up being a villain. I honestly, to be honest with you, I can't put her as a villain there. That self-preservation, and she is 1,000% in the right to do that. So anyway, let's look at the gamer's analysis. The gamer ranks her at number 4. Chronica, I believe, who is a new addition to the game as well. She's another new character, but I don't want to confuse the people who are newer and just wanted to listen to the podcast and to hear my views on stuff to get too confused. But Chronica is a new character to Mortal Kombat 11, which is the latest Mortal Kombat game. She's at number 3, and at some point maybe we can talk about her. But yeah, the gamer puts her at number 4 on the list, and I didn't know it was that deep for some people, but apparently it really is. It's surprising. And so I'll just read to you what they said so that you can get an idea of where they're coming from. So the gamer says, Mortal Kombat's resident bug lady was somewhat unceremoniously shoved into players' faces in Mortal Kombat X. She's played off as some important character who was retconned, and to explain retconned, it means that a character is added to a new game, or a new character is added into the game, and the history is also intertwined with older versions of the game. So coming up through the various sequences of the game, they weren't there, but then they added to the latest game, and their histories are just intertwined. So you have to assume when you're playing a new game that they were always there. That's basically what retcon means. Right, so they say, so she's played off as some important character who was retconned into events in Mortal Kombat, going back as far as Mortal Kombat 2. Now, the MK series is no stranger to retcons like this, but Devorah's just feels so horribly cobbled together in an attempt to justify killing veteran characters like Melina and Baraka and taking part in key events surrounding important items. Nothing she accomplished feels right, regardless of her being a villain. She just leaves a foul taste in your mouth with the way she's inserted into the universe, and that is the end of their little paragraph. I personally have no issues with Devorah, as you can possibly tell. For me, MKX was an attempt to bring a new generation to the light. It was a fresh start. It was a clean slate. The thing is, guys, as much as we love Johnny Cage and the Melinas and the Shang Tsuns, these people aren't invincible, and they will and they must age at some point. That's just the way of things. But more the Johnny Cages and the Melinas, because Melina is she is a construct. She's flesh and blood, but she's not, and I feel like she has less of an expiry date than Johnny Cage does. But you get the point. So NetherRealm Studios, who are the people behind the franchise, I feel like they recognize this, and that's why they took this direction to try to introduce a new generation of persons. So we get the Cassie Cages, and we get Jax's daughter. I can't remember her name right now. It's just escaping me any moment, and I hate that because I love her character. But they took that direction because they knew that the world continues and the world goes on, and they wanted to kind of reflect that. And I guess in a way they wanted to get characters that kind of resonated with a younger generation, because some of the older characters may not resonate as much with the new ones. Because I know for me, when I saw Cassie with her haircut at the time, I had decided to like literally chop off my hair and to rock a pixie cut, and you know, it was a bold move, a bold haircut for me to try. It was out of my wheelhouse because before at least I was usually very conservative with what I did with myself, but this was like a whole new adventure for me. And so I was able to relate to her, and a lot of this stuff that her boldness resonated with me. So when I hear takes like this, I understand the nostalgia, but I know it's nostalgia, and I kind of side eye it a little bit. MKX was a blanking of the slate, and so any one of those characters had the opportunity to step up. And for me, Devore was one of those persons that did an admirable job of setting herself up for longevity in the game and longevity in the franchise, or establishing herself. And she does it with the oldie but goodie climb on everyone's head stick. I do agree with Gamer when they say that her character feels like it was an excuse to kill off the characters that we love. And in that sense, I get the frustration because I really love Melina's story in MK9. But then, and they gave us such a strong story too, a strong origin. Like in the older games, like Deception, and yeah, at least Deception, because I remember seeing her in Deception. I don't really remember seeing her anywhere else. But they gave her such a nice story, a nice origin story, and attaching her to Katana was so brilliant to give her some dimension and stuff. And here we are talking about dimension again. But then they came in Mortal Kombat 10 and killed her off without giving her a fair shake, or at least allowing us to see her attempt at the throne, other than her trying to steal back the amulet from Kotakan, which is kind of given the kind of character that we got to know in MK9. And they kill her off instantly in MKX. The math didn't math for me in that, and how they got rid of her. And so I feel the frustration in that, from that angle. I also understand that the only reason NetherRealm Studios killed her off was because they wanted to do it for shock value. Guys, they want you to pay attention to this game more than anything else, right? And they want to keep your attention. And so while the brutalities and the fatalities may get a lot more gruesome, at some point you may start to desensitize, and they don't want that. They want you to keep playing for hours and hours and hours beyond the fatalities and the brutalities, sorry. They know they gave Melina a good story. Edward Scissorhands, aka Baraka, was hanging in there. He was just there. I don't feel like he played any important part. He was just there with his little tribe. And then just like that, from some nowhereian character, they were gone. That was it. I don't know that they successfully captured the shock. I mean, they did shock people, but I don't know that they did it in a way that was successful and in a way that would have pleased all Mortal Kombat fans. But for most of us, the way that Melina was killed was more harrowing than the fact that she was actually killed. But I guess that kind of gives us someone new to direct our anger at. And this kind of falls in line with the whole new generation introduction kind of thing that they were trying to attempt. At the end of the day, though, I don't know that this is worthy of worst new character of the decade, especially just after one teeny tiny game. Devora had a simple job, and she did the job, while making a solid place for herself in the process, in this new incarnation of the game. And besides, if NetherRealm Studios is taking Aftermath as part of their canon and taking it seriously, none of this actually matters, because the timeline is basically reset, and NetherRealm Studio has a clean slate to work with the exception of Lucan being God, because he became a god, and you can't really ignore that at this point. He's the god of fire and thunder. Can't ignore that at this point. How can you just start over from there? Also, Raiden became mortal, so you can't really ignore those two events unless you went the other way. And well, I think even if you went the other way, with Shang Tsung becoming the god of the hourglass and becoming basically immortal. You can't just ignore at least those parts of it. But they have a clean slate to work with, and they can literally do anything from here on out. And I highly suspect that it will include, more than likely, they're going to bring Melina back. I just hope that they fit Devora in there somewhere, because her backstabbing abilities could provide some excellent tension and provide a great story with Melina at Outworld's throne as well. So I do hope that they reuse Devora, that she's not just a one-time, two-time thing. She's a great character. She was built, or at least she has the potential to be rebuilt really, really well in terms of her story. Her powers are great. I like her powers, but I feel like her story could have been better strung together. And in that sense, I agree with Kima. Anyway, I've been talking for so long. This show is already so long. So let's just wrap it up this week. IMO, my defense for Devora is, she was looking out for her people, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody cared about her at the time. Nobody was looking out for her. The Elder Gods had forsaken her at this point. So she had to look out for her own self. So most of this hate actually is coming from nostalgia. And I feel like we really need to put that away when we talk about Devora from here on out. And really, that's that on that. I don't think she's a bad character, guys. I really don't mind her as a character in the game. I know some of you do, though. Some of you may agree with Gima and you feel like she was coupled together in an attempt to just shock. And so you can feel free to share that with me on Twitter. That's at VPN on YouTube. As well as here on Anchor, if you have the app, you can share it via voice notes, voice messages, or voice messaging. And maybe a couple episodes down, we may spice things up with some voice notes and tweets and opinions. But for now, thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends. We're on YouTube on Mondays and Fridays, Tuesdays and Saturdays, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, as long as God gives me breath. With your comments, with what your counter arguments would be, and who I should try to defend next, and I may feature you in the next episode. I'll see you next time.